What's going on? All thanks for tuning in once again. Let's talk Wardley versus Parker. This fight here is mispriced. I'm just going to get straight into it. Fabio Wardley at plus 450 is a joke. Wardley, I believe, has knocked out every opponent that he's fought or stopped them. Went the distance once with Clark and then broke his face in the next fight in the rematch. Massive punch on him. Before I continue, obviously, do your own research. Don't take my advice in terms of betting or anything like that. This is just one man's opinion. But in my opinion, this is very mispriced. Plus 450 Fabio Wardley just to win. This isn't just knockout. This is just to win. This is how the bookies have it. Plus 450. Joseph Parker, don't get me wrong, he's more experienced, but he has been jobbed, numerous times against Shang. He's been knocked out from Joyce. Wardley hasn't hit the canvas once, not that I can recall anyway. He's got a devastating right hand, and it's a loop, he's got a loop on it. It's a hook, isn't it? So he can punch around the guard. He can catch you in the 10th round. Justice Hooney knows all about that. Hooney, dominating the fight, and then one punch, game over. The right hand speaks for itself. And Wardley is a two-handed fighter, but when he gets in the pocket, he tends to, let his hands go. He's a mid-range hooker, you could say. He likes to let his hands go and throw hooks, power shots. He's also got a chin on him, which is concerning. Because, although his face didn't look too flash against Justice Hooney, he didn't look like he was, on his last legs. He was going to hit the canvas. They were going to stop the fight. Sure, the body language didn't look too great, but, he wasn't really in trouble where he wasn't throwing back. He was always throwing back, covering up and things like that. So Joseph Parker, I believe he's got, a lot of trouble in this fight, because Parker's a guy that likes to fight, mid to long range. He likes to throw big punches at range, ring coverage and things like that. He likes to do that. He doesn't like to really trade inside the pocket. If you watch the Piccoli fight where Parker does get a knockout win, he hasn't had a knockout win in his last 3 fights. He got a knockout win against Piccoli. That was from a shot that was basically an overhand right, I believe, which was thrown from distance, So what I'm saying is that you give Fabio Wardley enough chance to, let his hands go. If you give him space, he's a very dangerous fighter. Justice Hooney never gave him space. This was why he was so dominant against Wardley. He was deep inside the pocket. He wasn't hesitating when Wardley was feinting. He was basically just going forward and pushing Wardley back. Had him on the ropes a lot of the time. Wardley's game is coming forward. He's not really good at fighting on the back foot. But Parker's game is fighting mid to long range. So it's going to be a hard night for Parker, in my opinion. It's not as easy as people expect it's going to be, Like I say, Wardley's got a chin on him. He can take a punch, ask David Adelaide. Wasn't David Adelaide on the ground? David Adelaide's a fighter. He likes to trade. He likes to throw. He likes to, fight in the pocket. And Wardley knocked him down. And then he ends up beating him, doesn't he? So we just saw Adelaide against Herkovic, where Adelaide gives Herkovic problems. Herkovic, obviously, I believe he's a silver or bronze medalist, one of the two. So these guys that Wardley are fighting, they're not just pushovers. Joseph Parker, he's had a good run, sure, but he's fought guys that are not in their prime. Wilder, he didn't look too good in his last fight, did he? You know, that was the level. That's the level that Wilder's at the moment. Shile Zhang just got stopped from Kaba Yao. You know, he's obviously got stamina issues. You know, Shile Zhang was dominating Parker, knocked him down twice. He's a very low volume fighter though, you know. You can see that he's got problems with the stamina, Zhang. Big puncher, problems with the stamina. Wilder, like I said, he's not the same. And then Bacoli, you know, coming off 48-hour notice, landing on the day of the fight, you know, Parker hasn't really proven that he can destroy Wardley with ease, you know. From what I've seen, you know, Wardley's got a resume of, I believe he's knocked out or stopped everyone that he's fought. He's a guy that likes to fight at mid to long range, or mid range, mid to short range, I should say. My apologies, but front-footed. So if Wardley can come forward against Parker, Parker's in big trouble. If Parker wants to try to give Wardley space, Parker's in big trouble because Wardley's got a massive right hand. You know, watch the Frazier Clark rematch. You know, he breaks the face of Clark in the first round. You know, all it takes is that one punch. Like I mentioned, Justice Hooney was dominating. He had his legs under him. You know, he wasn't really sitting down in the corner. You know, he had the Fisher legs. You know, he had a lot of stamina. And Wardley comes there with one shot and closes the show. You know, that's all it takes for him. Is one big shot. I do believe that Parker is more experienced, and Parker comes in the pocket better than Wardley, or than Hooney, sorry. You know, this is what really caused Hooney the fight, was when he was coming inside the pocket with his guard down. You know, like I mentioned, you know, gave Wardley enough space just to let that right hand go and close the show. You know, Parker is more disciplined when he comes in the pocket, but the thing is that Parker wants to knock out Wardley. You know, he's changed his game with Andy Lee. He wants to come forward, and you know, he found out with Zhang that he couldn't do that, could he? You know, so with Wardley, what's going to happen if Wardley catches him? How's he going to respond? Wardley hasn't hit the canvas. Wardley's got a chin on him. So it's all going to come down to, can Parker take the punches of Wardley? Can Parker fight Wardley, backing him up against the ropes? You know, can he push him on the back foot? You know, Wardley's just fought Hooney. He now understands that he's got weaknesses going backwards. You know, surely he's going to be working on that game. So a plus 450 is a no-brainer in my opinion. You know, it's heavyweight boxing. Like I said, devastating power from Wardley. You know, knocked out or stopped everyone that he's fought. Some guys he's completely iced out. You know, devastating power. So I can see it going two ways. You know, I can see Wardley KO or Parker points. That's the only two ways that I see it happening. A lot of people are saying Parker stoppage or knockout. It's possible, but again, Wardley hasn't been on the canvas before. Parker doesn't have Wardley's power. Yes, Parker's got more power than Hooney, but Hooney didn't knock down Wardley, did he? So I think this is a 50-50. I don't think plus 450 is accurate. Parker's more experienced. Wardley's more fresher. You know, he's been more active. So I'm gonna go Parker on points, but the plus 450 is a no-brainer. So I do think that if Wardley wins, it will be knockout. But I mean, just to win is plus 450, like I said. So let me know what you think. Again, you know, don't take my advice. Do your own research. But this is just one man's opinion. Leave yours. I think it's going to be a great fight. I'm expecting fireworks from Wardley, and let's hope that it does end in devastating fashion. Leave your take. and I'll catch you next time. Peace.